We're now moving the conversation to the flooding. I mean, with all the statistics that were being churned out and projections of floods this year, that's the 2023, that will be worse than 2022. There, in spite of the devastation that was faced in 2022, it is becoming worrisome, and Nigerians are wondering, how can indeed this flood be mitigated? And that's where we're taking our conversation. We'll be connecting via Skype with Mr. Oscar Danladi. He is the team lead, Jos Green Center. He'll be connecting via Skype all the way from Jos. Hello, Mr. Danladi.
Hi, good morning. I'm excited to be here. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Danladi.
Good morning, Danladi, yes. And then thanks for joining us on ASO Morning.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here and interesting conversation because I think this is the right time to, start preparing the minds of people. So I'm really excited to be sharing. Good morning, viewers.
Danladi, we don't have so much time with you, so we'll just go straight to it. I mean, we know the devastating effect of flood last year, that's 2022, and we've been hearing projections of even worse this year. Let's just go to mitigation of this flood. What can we do, you and I, before we get to the government? What would you say should be done as soon as possible? The rains are coming, or have come in some states in Nigeria. So what would you say we should start doing, and how aware are Nigerians when it comes to matters of the environment?
So I think to mitigate, we need to know factors that are responsible. And in most cases, you would realize that our unsustainable practices, especially how we relate with waste, forms a chunk of why lots of communities are flooded, because really you can't stop rain from falling. You can also stop it from running. So it's very important that we know that rain has to be allowed to flow. And one of the critical factors is how we manage our waste. A lot of people are very, very interesting and funny that when rains begins to fall, that's when they want to dump their waste into the waterways. And already the accumulation of what has happened before the raining season, a lot of people have already blocked the waterways. So it's very important that we know that how we manage our waste improves the way we deal with flood. So I would say very quickly that we need to figure out how to start cleaning the waterways, and again to begin to adopt very healthy practices. And it's interesting to see that we think waste is supposed to be something that government should do, but I strongly believe that waste is supposed to be a community effort. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is the fact, because of the absence of rain blockers and the trees particularly that are responsible for reducing even the heavy fall of rainfall in most communities, most of those trees are gone. So it's very important that we begin, although I mean the best time to plant trees is yesterday, but again it's not too late. The next best time is today. So people would need to start thinking very quickly, get some of these factors. I can go on and talk about other ways, because I really feel that our government, because what we saw last year were factors surrounding the inability for government to do what they need to do, particularly talking about creating dams to accommodate. And the rainfall in Nigeria is supposed to be a huge opportunity for us for irrigation farming. But there are absence of dams. Some of those dams have been awarded many years ago. So I think there's also an aspect of advocacy. We need to start addressing government from grassroots level, to state levels and then to national levels. What are the mitigative things like building of dams that are supposed to be done? Even our roads, like I think one of the video we're seeing now, you can imagine this whole road does not have a drainage system. So we need to start advocating for government to do what they need to do, because I think that's one area that government comes in. And if we do some of these things, they're basic things. It's not rocket science, where I'm pretty sure we should be able to deal with flood.
Okay, we have just about 2 minutes to go. So before we let you go, I'll just ask you this question. I'm happy you talked about, irrigation, which is something we should be considering. And if you look at food security, Nigeria is already on the lowest in food security. Our inflation rate is already high. Sadly, and good for us too, NIMET has informed us that as early as January, the flood outlook for the year 2023, we haven't seen much being done yet. We always like to have the fire brigade approach to, sorting out problems. And then if we recall, especially the one in Lokaja is closer to Abuja here, so it caused a lot of traffic. Food couldn't even come across, couldn't come from that axis here. And then we've been told that this year there will be spillover from the Atlantic Oceans that, of course, will join the confluence of River Niger and River Benue, which is also, a food area in Benue. Benue is already struggling with its own insecurity with headmen and bandits. Plateau State, also another food basket in the country, is also suffering all those kind of things. But without talking about the problems, because we know the problems, what can farmers do this year outside government? Because you're not a government official, so you can't represent government. But what can farmers do this year to mitigate against the storms, to ensure that there's a certain kind of food security and then these floods don't damage their crops?
Thank you for raising that question, because I think it's very critical to understand that the impact of flood and indeed climate change affects all areas of life. But I think one of the state of emergencies is how it affects the food uh, bank and the food sustainability. Uh, we're seeing some smarter ways of farming now. Unlike what we used to know, that people need massive available land. We're seeing the rising of people using very very little, even people with, because sometimes when we start talking about greenhouse farming, it's capital extensive. But when we approach it even from very simple backyard farming, I have a couple of sacks at the back of my house. I'm able to get some soil, and I'm able to even compose, as fertilizer. So I really think that farmers should start thinking of some smarter ways of farming. Now you can even farm within an enclosed area where you can control the sunlight, you can control the water level, you can even control the nutrients that get into the plant. So there has to be some smarter ways of farming. And I think this is heavily dependent on even us thinking generally about how our economy is supposed to be driven. Nigeria still depends on fossil fuel heavily. But then I would always say the Stone Age is no more, not because there are no stones, but because people have innovated other ways of doing things. And I think crude oil too very soon we're already seeing. And the reason why our inflation rate is going high, apart from the fact that there is massive corruption, we are also seeing that the crude oil rate is dropping. So I think it's very important, and for me, very quickly, that we need to think of smarter ways of farming. People can farm at the backyards of their houses. They can farm using sacks, and those who have the capital can go into greenhouse farming. And these are very simple, basic ways that we could even mitigate even farming within secure areas because of even the insecurity. But I think if we start thinking smartly, and generally, if we start rethinking our logic of economy, because we have to start thinking in a secular, restorative manner, rather than thinking in a linear manner where, it's just buy, use, and dump. If we start innovating, if we start thinking outside the box, and even thinking as if there's no box, there's a whole lot we can do to mitigate the food crisis. But I think it's a general economy thing that we have to think economically. And some of us that are activists in this area, we're also advocating for people to think innovatively and to solve some of these problems in a very smarter way.
Okay, I like that we have gone into people and what they can do. Earlier, you had mentioned how communities can take charge in waste disposal. We know how waste plays a very critical role in flooding because they clog the water space. But my question would
Yeah.
be, how can communities, having seen how it goes, I mean, even the scavengers that even do this, we call them Baban Bola, we also,
Yeah.
government are clamping down on them. So how can communities do better in proper waste management?
One of the most abused resource that we have in Nigeria are the young people. And there are massive opportunities in waste management. And because waste are generated from the household level to the community level, it's important that communities start thinking of the opportunities, in as much as, yes, we're seeing the crisis of waste contributing directly or indirectly to flooding and affecting, the whole of life. Communities can start thinking of innovative ways. Partly what we do, my center do, the Just Green Center, we try to engage communities in what we call we give communities basic trainings on how to convert waste into resources. Uh, and at community level, we're not talking about, what we see in recent times where people just collect this waste and sell them and then we keep selling them. In fact, the next gold mine, apart from data, we're talking about data being a gold mine. I think waste is also another massive gold mine. Why? Because it's generated every day. So it's to really get communities to think of what are the opportunities in them. For the biodegradable waste, because again, waste is one of my areas of expertise. For the biodegradable waste, we have massive opportunities of bringing out organic fertilizers from them, and communities can build very simple hubs for young people to begin to compost and make fertilizers from them. For the plastic waste, there are very basic technology of how you can even make uh, paving tiles with them. You can make roofing sheets with them. So they are not rocket science. They're basic skills that if we just apply a bit of our heads and common sense, we will be able to create jobs at community levels. So, but most importantly, I think one of the critical areas that community should start thinking, and it's something we are advocating for, is waste at primary level. When you dump waste, you mix waste all together and you dump it, it becomes even more difficult to deal with. But if it's separated from household level, you get those who need the plastics, you get those who need the food waste, you get those who need the metal, you get those who need the resources, aluminium. There's no need to dump waste when you know that it's a huge resource. So for me, that's where I'm going to, that communities should start innovating with it, should start building hubs for young people. And you would see that we're dealing with this crisis at multi levels
Peripheral,
because
yes, right.
we're creating opportunities for our young people.
It's been very interesting talking to you, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But I can promise you we're going to drag you into the studio so we can have more
Proper,
discussions,
exactly.
especially on this waste to wealth management. It's something that we have a lot in Nigeria, and of course it's something we need our youths getting involved in. So thank you so much, Mr. Oscar Danladi. We've been speaking with Mr. Oscar Danladi. He's the team leader, Just Green Center, and he joined us all the way via Skype talking about flood forecast for the year and ways we can mitigate over them. So thank you so much for being our guest on ASO Morning.
Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Oscar.
Great. And on that note, we wrap up today's episode of Asa Money. But of course, we won't go anywhere without saying thank you so much for being part of us this morning. My name is Ifunanya Amafili.
And I am Joy Asoye. So good to know you joined us and learned all the lessons we had for you today. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Have a wonderful day.